everyone. Welcome to the EO Wonder podcast. I'm so pleased to introduce you to Julie Cantor, an MD-JD and the founder of Harlen Collection. Julie D. Cantor, MD-JD, is the founder of Harlen. She's a practicing litigator, and her cases focus on eradicating obstetric violence and overturning wrongful convictions. For the better part of 15 years while creating Harlen, she practiced law with two elite firms and taught reproductive rights, medical ethics, and the law, a seminar she created as an adjunct professor at the UCLA School of Law. She writes and lectures about issues in law, medicine, and justice, and her work has been published in top journals and popular press, including the New England Journal of Medicine and the NBC News THINK platform. She's a member of the bar of various state and federal courts, including the Supreme Court of the United States, where she has represented amici curiae on a pro bono basis. Julie holds bachelor's and master's degrees from Stanford University, a law degree from Berkeley Law, and an MD from the Yale School of Medicine. She was a visiting student at Yale Law School and in college, winner of an honorable mention in the Eli Wiesel Prize in Ethics for her essay on women's rights as human rights. Julie studied art history in Siena, Italy, as did her mother, and in high school, she was a valedictorian and the student body president. And perhaps most importantly, she was voted best dressed in 8th grade. Welcome to the EO Wonder podcast, Julie.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm trying to get on my, I had this teed up and then it, of course, didn't work. So I may just have to do it without headphones, but.
You sound great.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll just do it, whatever, sans.
Yeah, you have a microphone? It sounds great, whatever it is.
I don't have them. I have nothing. I have hardly anything. This is not even a green screen. So my hair is like in and out right now. But I was so like, well, cute. We're just going to do it.
We're just going to do it. And I already recorded my intro of you right before I joined. So I basically read your bio, which is at the bottom of your website. And so that's where we're going to continue. Is that okay? So basically, I'm just like, hey, everyone, welcome to the EO1 podcast. Here's Julie. And I read that whole thing. And then, and perhaps most importantly, she was voted best dressed in 8th grade.
Right. I was like, it's so funny. As you know, I have a 9th grader. Wow, that's bad. He just started 9th grade. And we were talking about clothes and just what's going on at school clothes wise. And then I told him that and he was laughing hysterically. He thought that was the funniest thing. And he said, I don't believe you. And I said, no, there are yearbooks. There's a middle school yearbook with my picture in it. I had big bangs and really huge, almost like a pyramid, all the way out. Cause I think I was trying to blow my hair dry and it was short, which is not going to work. And he thought that was the funniest thing. He was rolling on the floor, metaphorically laughing. So it's funny.
Well, you were valedictorian and student body president, but the most important thing, right, is that you look good.
Yeah, it's super tongue in cheek. It's just all of these things that happen to us as we go forward. And I just thought that was looking back. It gets so spot on because I've always loved art and style and fashion, but it's just funny how you look back and you're like, oh, you were who you were back then. And I don't know, you just kind of grow into yourself, but kernels of your soul are there from the beginning. But I just put it on there more as I just thought it was funny. So.
Well, especially because you're the founder of Harlen. So let's talk a little bit about your entrepreneurship journey, because you have such an illustrious background but this is the Entrepreneurs Organization podcast. And I'd love to know, what was inspiration for Harlen and tell our audience what Harlen is all about.
Absolutely. So, I think I've been inspired as I've gone along by people who are entrepreneurial in whatever they do. So for example, my father was a children's dentist, but he created a business with a brand. He was the spaceship dentist. And there was something about that idea of creating a project, creating a world that was just instilled in me and my family from forever ago. And this was before I mean, branding, I suppose, was always a thing, but this was like back in the day, like the 70s. So I was always thinking, and my parents were very entrepreneurial. Like another story about my dad is when he was in college to earn money, he chartered buses back from, he was at University of Buffalo. He wasn't at Buff State. He was at the SUNY Buffalo. And then he needed to get back to Long Island. And so he would charter buses and then people would buy tickets. So he would have a free ride, basically. So just a lot of that spirit was always instilled in me about, do something different, be creative. And of course, I grew up in the era of Apple and Steve Jobs and all of the creativity and usefulness that came out of that. So this was all in my head. And as I went through school, I was really interested in, obviously, art, style, fashion, but I was also interested in civil rights, in literature, in history, in science, in medicine, in women's health. So I never felt like there was the right exact fit for me. If you look back, there are lots of people in history who've done many different things, and it's not considered odd or strange. And, Kalika, you're such an inspiration because of the different businesses that you've been in and being able to say, like, this is me. Yeah, I run, like, speaking about you, you are the founder and the president of the Mindfulness Club at Harvard Westlake, where all of our children go to school. And yet you have a design business and the clip, like you have everything. So I find, and the waxing, it's just, so people like you, honestly, are really inspiring. And I'm so happy to be in your orbit. But back to Harlen, I was working at a law firm in downtown LA. And at the time I had to bring back and forth a lot of stuff, like my computer, and I would give a presentation, or you would need to go to court for some reason. And I always felt like I really needed a bag to look the part, frankly, and also be totally functional, carry around all the stuff. And it occurred to me that there wasn't really anything there for people who wanted to emanate that confidence. They didn't necessarily want to have a handbag, because handbags are amazing and beautiful and their own pieces of art, especially the ones that are made in Italy. But they're also not necessarily functional for a computer or the things you need for a presentation or your folder or whatever you're carrying around. So that was my first thought. And one of the things that my law firm had were these rolling bags. But if you're thinking about shoes for a second, like they were the equivalent of like, gosh, I don't know, like work boots or the orthotic shoes or, something that was very clunky pilot bag. And those are really functional. And that can be a totally amazing look if that's your look. But it just didn't feel right. It felt like I was wearing my grandfather's like sports coat or something. And I just thought there have to be other people out here that think this is odd. And then if you layer in issues of like women's rights and women in the workplace and equity, pay equity, all of those things, I felt like it was as if this portion of people, this community of people, were in a sense like forgotten or not attended to. And so that was my original impetus for that. I wanted to get into that space. And it's hard because I wanted to create something that was at the highest level. And that involved many, many, many trips to Italy and prototypes. And, we've started now to work on I'm calling it, 2.0 collection. And I have so many ideas of how I want this to be and grow and be really useful to people, but stand for equality and justice. And I know that probably sounds like, oh, that's kind of weighty stuff. But I just think that we really need to embrace that idea of pluralism and equality in everything we do, because there is so much that's baked in that we don't even see that is a problem. And so I want what Harlen needed to stand for. And I should tell you, it's named after my grandparents, Harriet and Lenny, who are Brooklyn born, first generation Americans. And my grandmother always worked. They were, I would say they were feminists before, well, I can't say before feminism existed, but they were staunch advocates for their two children, one of whom is my mother and the other is her younger sister. one of the things that really struck me as interesting and why I wanted to name the company after them was because of that, because of the example they set. Also, my grandmother had amazing style, and she didn't have a lot of money, but it didn't matter. It was about the style, not the dollars. And it was about having a look and being able to put things together in a creative way so that it's not a question of being priced out of something. And I think that's important as we go into Harlen 2.0. One of the goals is to have pieces and options for people that are across a range so that it is more accessible to people and we can bring in more people to our community, and have that, that range of, I mean, we're not going to do lipstick, but the idea of going from like, the lipstick to the couture kind of idea. So that's one of the things that's in mind. But going back to my grandparents really briefly, they had two girls, and it was a time where if you wanted to have a career as a woman, my mom always said her choices were to be a secretary, a nurse, a teacher, or a social worker, all wonderful careers. But those she felt those were the four choices for her. So while, those are amazing and wonderful careers, the idea was that the lack of choice and the lack of autonomy was the issue. And her sister ended up she is 4 years younger, and she was in a bit of a different era. So she became a professor and she's a psychology professor, had some different options that my mother didn't feel were available to her. But one thing that my grandfather did, and this always struck me as being pretty brazen at the time, in the mid 50s, he looked around and he said, there aren't any sports leagues on Long Island, or at least this part of Long Island where they lived in New York, Long Island, New York, for girls. And so he started a sports league for girls. And one of my mom's best friends is somebody still to this day who played on the softball team with her. And I have this article where it was written up, my grandmother saved it from 1958. It was written, or 57, 58, in the Long Island Post or whatever. I forget what it was called, but it's a picture of my mom with a baseball bat, and she's about 9, 10, 11. And it said like, everybody plays. And there's some really interesting kind of misogyny built in there. Like they can even throw, and, things along those lines that are sort of amazing when you step back and you're like, wow, but it's the era and you have to take it as a piece of history. But that was the reasoning. I felt like it was the right thing to do, was to combine those names and to imbue that spirit, because it's literally in my DNA. And I thought to have it in the company DNA made sense.
I mean, your pieces are so gorgeous.
Thank you.
Works of art for the art of work. That's what you say on your site. And you've actually coined a term, modern career pieces.
Yes. And we have been thinking about ways to distinguish what we do. And again, I went back to Steve Jobs and the way that he presented the offering, thinking of, 1,000 songs in your pocket and the magic of the iPad. And I know that at the time people, kind of were like, well, I don't like that name, but then it was what it is. And then the iMac, so I always wanted to think of ways as we went, and this is an entrepreneurial issue, is how do you distinguish yourself? And so one way that I thought of doing that, and it was based off of reading I did from some professors, Professor Emeritus at Berkeley actually talked about brands and distinguishing yourself as a brand. And that was one of the things I wanted to do, is to think of what are these things? Because they're not, people are like, oh, I get it, it's on wheels, it's luggage. I'm like, no, it's not luggage. Oh, it's a handbag. No, it's not a handbag. Oh, it's a briefcase. No. So, try to think of a term for what this was that I was trying to create. And that's what I came up with. And that's what I trademarked. And I felt like it was right, because it struck the idea of art, which is always what we're trying to do, is to create really unique pieces of art and in very limited quantities. So it's not the sense of, oh, everybody has mine, or, one of the things that we're going to do in 2.0 is to offer ways to embellish the item so you can kind of add your own personality to almost a canvas, but to be able to pull back from it if you need it to be completely almost stoic. You need it to be completely understated. Like we don't have our, Harlen's name written all over the thing. It is blind embossed. It's really hard to find, actually. And it's just not about that. It's about the user. It's about this woman who has confidence, who has style, and who wants to bring it to the workplace in a way that maybe a backpack couldn't offer, or a bag that like falls down can't offer. One of the things we wanted to do is make them stand up in the briefcase sense, so that they had that element of structure and confidence in the bag. And this is not to say that anybody who owns our bag needs the bag for confidence. Let's not get it wrong. It's just to say we wanted it to be a reflection of self. And all we are the guides on this person's journey. And we thought that the person should have the option of looking the part that they chose for themselves. And again, it's coming back to options, because there are plenty of things that one can use for work, and that's amazing. I just felt like for what I was looking for and what colleagues of mine were looking for, and friends and people who I've met, that there wasn't that. And that was the goal of the offer, was to do that. But thank you for that. We did really focus on what is this? What can we call it? And then how is that unique? And so when people think about it, it reflects what we were trying to do, which was combine the artistry of Italy. And it is unbelievable, the people who we have been fortunate enough to be introduced to. And these are like little ateliers behind gates, off of dirt roads in towns that are off the beaten path that it's a journey in and of itself. And the other thing about all of our pieces is that there are so many parts to each thing, and each item is really greater than the sum of its parts, to use that phrase, because there are so many artisans who have literally their hands on the product. They're hand sewing, they are hand painting, they are like, it takes 3 days to finish the zipper pull because of the palladium finishing that needs to happen. Like, this is not fast. It's not fast. It's not fast fashion. It's not mass produced. It is slow and artistic and deliberate. But that was what we wanted to do with works of art for the art of work. And the art of work, again, is really about the people who own the product, because I'm not defining what your work is, what art you bring. I mean, look at your background. That is your art of work. Everything that you do is your art of work. And so if we have the opportunity to support you in your journey and to give you something that you look at and it can make you happy for what it stands for what our company stands for how we treat our clients, that's the goal.
I love how you mentioned your mom, playing softball in 1958. And we have come a long way in this journey as women entrepreneurs. But 2022, Roe versus Wade. Now I see on your website you have like this dissent cuff, and you had put up ads in New York. Tell our audience about why this issue is so important to you.
Absolutely. And I'm wearing my dissent cuff right now. I don't know if it comes out. Oh, look, my
beautiful.
Because of that. But I'm and the interesting thing is, in the inside, I have in memoriam to Roe versus Wade, I put the case citation. So I'm a lawyer. I practice law, and I have background in medicine, and I've lectured for years on issues of autonomy and informed consent in medical care. One of the tenets of medical ethics, which I studied and have taught about, for about a dozen years, I taught a seminar that I created on reproductive rights, medical ethics, and the law at the UCLA School of Law, a small seminar. So I've long been interested in this topic, and I actually created the class when I was in medical school, because I just felt like there was nothing really out there in the medical school. And I taught it to undergrads. Actually, I was hired by this program. It's called the Sophomore Seminar Series, and the sophomores hired me to teach this class, which was awesome. That was really generous of them. So I've been studying and teaching and thinking about and writing about and lecturing about this area for a long time. And to me, the issue of Roe is not about privacy. It's not about abortion, quite frankly. What it is about the right to control your body. And that is critical to me. And that is implicit in the idea of liberty. It is in the 14th Amendment. If you're a strict constructionist, like some of the people on the Supreme Court say they are, which means from a legal scholarship point of view that you only look to the words that are in the document, and there isn't the word privacy, therefore Roe shouldn't exist. Well, there is the word liberty in the 14th Amendment, and there is the word equal protection of the laws. And what strikes me about this entire issue is that you will never find, at least up to now, you will not be able to find a court order forcing a mother or a father to give of their body to save a child's life or to enhance that child's health. Now, you might think that is morally indefensible, and I actually would agree with you. Like, if my child needed my kidney, I would be running to the OR, sprinting. Who can do this? Let's go. I give of my body to save my child. But not a question. That's not the point. The point is the state coming to my house and strapping me down in a gurney and taking me by order of the government. That's the issue. And it doesn't happen to anybody else but pregnant women, that the government literally takes over your body and decides you're going to be an incubator. And what we see on the other end in the birth area, and this is an area that I am currently litigating, is the issue of what is called obstetric violence, where the system thinks it knows better. And I will tell you, and we don't have time to get into this on this podcast, but the system's tools are flawed. Okay, they are flawed, and everybody in the field knows it. And it's just one of those sort of scandalous things that just kind of is going to happen until somebody, calls it out. And maybe this will be something that I can, maybe in 2023, that'll be on my list of things to do. But for right now, staying focused. But my point here is that across the country, and you can Google obstetric violence, okay, you will see stories, really horrific stories of women being held down, forcibly held down to extract their baby by a vacuum, wheeled to the OR for a C-section without their consent. And there's no justice for them. And there are court orders that say that this must go on because the doctor says so. One thing that you have to understand, and you have to do a deep-ish dive into this, is that the medicine is flawed. But even if it wasn't flawed, who has the right to decide what happens to your body? Who has the right to decide? And so what we posted all over New York in these big posters, and we had a great team, amazing team on the ground, and we actually made a video of it that's on our website now, of these posters going up, was we dissent. We dissent from the idea that you do not have the right to control your body. And this dissent that we wrote and actually got copyrighted, which is kind of exciting. Like, if you're an entrepreneur, you always like to have your work recognized in that way, is that as a matter of law, you must have the right to control your body. As a matter of liberty, you must have the right to control your body. And so this dissent was written on behalf of our community, basically embodying the idea of autonomy. Do what you want, do what you will. But my problem is when you come for me, you come for my body, and it's not equal. There's not equal protection. We have over 100,000 or up to 100,000 people on the kidney transplant waiting list. Those are really important people with lives and families and the ability to be productive in society and pay taxes and all kinds of really pro-social things. Why don't we take kidneys from people who have two? I mean, seriously. Or why don't we have, if there's a blood shortage or a bone marrow shortage, we have if we're into saving lives, why don't we save all the lives? Because you have a right to control your body. And because courts have found that if you don't have that right, we are into fascism. I mean, we have dipped off the end. And that's a real problem, because it's not going to be equal. They're going to come for people without money, and they will eventually, come for you. And it makes me think about the poem by Pastor Martin Niemöller, which came out of the Holocaust, which was along the lines of, first they came for the socialists, but I was not a socialist, so I did not speak out. Then they came for the communists, et cetera, et cetera. And then the last line is, and then they came for the Jews, and I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't speak out. But then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. And so my concern, looking back on not just that history of the Holocaust, which is something that I recently learned that some of my grandfather's cousins were actually killed in 1941 in Ukraine, related to the Holocaust. And so it gave me another sense of a connection to that era. But you don't have to look to just that, which is one of sort of the most historic, I would say, genocides, but there's genocide all over the place. There's genocide right here in America, and we have all kinds of ongoing issues stemming from injustice. The issue is people need to be able to have the law treat them as equal and treat them as a person deserving his liberty. And so my problem with Dobbs is that it took away that idea. And the dissent in Dobbs did talk about that this was not just about, look, Roe did talk about privacy, and you could say, all right, well, maybe privacy isn't there, although privacy is in other cases, in a case called Cruzan versus Director, which was an end of life withdrawal of care case. Do we have a privacy interest? So you can find what you want. I mean, this is how judges do it. Like there's a concurring opinion, there's a dissenting opinion. It's not like it's math, right? And there's one answer. If it was math, it'd be a lot easier, or chemistry, right? You have the periodic table. It's either on the table or it's not. I mean, there's electrons and it's a number, that's it. But that's just not the way this works. It's really a reflection of values and policy. And what the court said, and this is another problem with Dobbs, is that it really undermined the legitimacy of the court, that all you had to do was put different people in office, to put different people on the court, and you could change the law of the land. And that's not particularly a terrific way to run a society. It just isn't, whether you agree with it or not. I would hope that we could all agree with that kind of a principle. But I do understand that, the idea that people thought of Roe as one of the, worst decisions ever, et cetera. But I would ask people to consider who has the right to control your body. And what does liberty mean to you? And are you okay when they come for you to take your blood, your kidney, and even when you're dead, okay? If you're brain dead and you're a beating heart donor, you still have the right for your family members to say, no, we're going to bury this person with these perfectly good organs and tissues that could be life-saving or could help research. No, you want to have your loved one buried intact. We honor that. We honor that for corpses. So where are we? And that was my issue. And that was the issue that struck me, because one of the things obviously that Harlen is about is women's equality, pay equity, women's equality of opportunity in the workplace. There's just so much like insidious behavior that is biased. And it's really unfortunate when you experience it. I was always told that you're going to have to work twice as hard to get half as far. And I thought that was really unfair. But, look, there is probably something to that even to this day, as you mentioned, but to have it baked into the society from the highest court to say that when the 14th Amendment talks about liberty, when it talks about equal protection of the laws, that just doesn't apply to you, or it can be outvoted. I remember something that Rachel Maddow said a long time ago, and I don't watch television much anymore, but for some reason I was watching her show, and I knew her from college. So it's always fun to see people like have wildly successful careers out in the world. I love watching people who you knew back in the day, go out and do amazing things. And certainly she's one of those people. But she said, it was true. You don't vote on fundamental rights. You don't vote on that. The fundamental rights are in the Constitution, and this is the floor of what everybody who's a member of this society gets. You get this bundle of rights, and you can't vote them away. Think about just the struggle for the right to vote in the South, and I think about the Edmund Pettus Bridge with John Lewis being beaten to within an inch of his life for the right to vote. I mean, so if we're talking about fundamental rights, I believe, and it's in the law, and I can point you to any number of common law cases, any number of Supreme Court opinions, any number of Supreme Court justices' thoughts on it. The history and tradition of this country is that you have, and that's what they look to. They say it's not in the history and tradition of this country. I think the right to control your body is, and I think if you were building a society on a desert island, you would say to yourself, okay, if we need your kidney, should we just be able to take it Or do you have a right to say no? And to me, that's what it's about.
I love the definition of dissent from Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg that you have on your website. A dissent is an appeal to the intelligence of a future day. Where do you think the future is going to take us with this?
I think the future is here, which is really interesting. I have one of my relatives, my cousin is a Politico, and so he's watching what's happening across the country, and others have written about this. But the idea that people are, even in states where it was expected that abortion would be outlawed or severely curbed, the people are saying no. The people are voting. And to the extent that you want to say, look, that's what the laboratory of the states is about. That's what democracy is about. The people should make a choice. And that's great, except if you're talking again about fundamental rights. Like if you believe, for example, that same-sex marriage should be a fundamental right, should you be able to just outvote that? And that was in Justice Thomas's writing, he was basically asking for litigation on these areas where the court has previously held these rights are fundamental and protected. He was saying, yeah, not really. This is up for a vote. And it comes down to the question of how much is up for a vote. Is interracial marriage up for a vote? That was a 1969 case, Loving versus Virginia. Should we vote on that if we don't think that's okay? So where does that line come in? And also in a pluralistic society like ours, where you have freedom of religion, if your religious view is that you have the right to control your body, and that if a pregnancy is endangering the life of the person carrying the pregnancy, that morally, ethically, religiously, that pregnancy needs to be terminated to save the life of the pregnant person, and hopefully so they can go on and have future children, if that's their wish. If the state outlaws that, is the state infringing on your religion? And is that a First Amendment violation? So that's coming. That's teed up in Florida. That's going through the courts in Florida now. But it's going to be interesting to see what the votes are and how it works, because I think people might at some point understand that this is not just about whether you believe in, like, tolerate abortion per se. And it's also really troubling what's going on in the medical community, because people really don't know what to do when there's a law with ambiguity. And laws are always ambiguous. This is why you go to court. You're like, what does that word mean? Well, I don't know. What did the legislature mean? What does it mean in the dictionary? Like, this is why it's litigated. But if you're in real time and you have somebody with an ectopic pregnancy, which means a pregnancy that is growing in a fallopian tube and it was not in the uterus, so that pregnancy is going to end. It's just a question of whether it's going to kill the person with the fallopian tube on its way to ending. And some people were concerned that, well, do we have to wait until the fetus is completely demised, where there's not a beating heart? The fetus is going to not survive. That is 100% sure. And some people are like, well, maybe we could transplant it. That's not a thing. And I don't know if it will ever be a thing, but it's not a thing now. And so the facts are what they are. But the concern is that people letting these pregnant people become septic, become infected, have a rupture, bleed out internally, because they're saying, well, we can't do anything yet because of the law. And so that effect on medicine, chilling the standard of care to be such that you have somebody who is going downhill, a patient, the pregnant patient who and you're watching is going downhill, but you feel like as a surgeon, your hands are tied by the state. I guess ask yourself, if that's you or your loved one, is that okay?
What can women entrepreneurs do, or even male entrepreneurs who are listening to this?
Absolutely. I think the key thing is to think about the arguments about autonomy and to think of yourself in a position of not being in control of your body. And this idea of bodily autonomy, like, we have a thing in this country called a writ of habeas corpus, which is produce the body, which is to say that the state is holding your body illegally. And it's in the criminal sense that you're being, you were convicted of a crime that doesn't exist, or those kinds of things. But this idea of being able to control your body, I think, is huge. But from an entrepreneurial perspective, I think it's really critical to look at the business that you're building, the community that you're supporting, and the values that you are instilling in everything that you do. And Kalika, you are such a wonderful example of this, because every one of your emails is full of light and hope and usefulness, and just such positive energy, mindfulness. Like, everything you do exudes charisma, it exudes happiness, it exudes positivity. And that's the kind of choice that I think people can make in their companies in terms of equality, in terms of family leave policies, encouraging, like, if you have a child, like, take time off, paternity leave, parental leave, maternity leave, parental leave. It should be baked into your, rules, regulations, policies, and your culture, that that's okay. And that we do need to have time to regroup, to have time for our families. And that maybe the way that we've done it, or we've grown up to do it now, it isn't the way it has to be. Again, it's not, like I said, I talked about the periodic table, it's not gravity. You can decide what kind of a company you want to create, and you can decide what message you want to have. And you can also pull from your community within the company, like what works for people. And you have the ability to change. And by being an entrepreneur, you are necessarily a community leader. You're obviously the company leader. And so you set the tone. So what are your values, and what values reflect the society in which you want to live? And then how can you have, whether your company is small or, Fortune 100, what's the microcosm that you have created to support the larger culture that you think is moral and just?
And likewise, you have been active in activism. It's one of your pillars. I'd love for you to share how you have been a shining example as a CEO of Harlen.
Activism is one of the things that we have thought about. And I was inspired. I'm just laughing because I'm thinking about my favorite thing the thing I looked forward to most in high school was getting Vogue magazine in that September issue. And I would have, like all of my textbooks, and then in there would be Vogue magazine. And I actually wrote about that for one of my college applications, because I just was like, look, this is who I am. So I'm just going to tell you that. But I remember some of the ads, and I was surprised by companies taking a stand, even so long ago, about gay rights, or about environment, or about racial equality. And I remember what a platform that was, to be able to be influential and to be able to set a tone with the items that you create. And so at Harlen, one of the things that we wanted to do with our first collection was to support girls' education. So everybody who owns, or some people own multiple, but each bag stood for a year of girls' education. And we donated the requisite amount to support a Girl in Room to Read's girls' education program, because we thought that that was a really important way to move opportunity forward for people around the globe and to change societies. It's like a pebble in the pond, and the ripple effect is enormous. And with that, when people purchased the product, we had a signed autographed copy, autographed by 2 Pulitzer Prize winning authors, their book, Half the Sky. And it talks about the importance of girls' education, and why, to quote Nicholas Kristof, well, to mangle his quote, there's no silver bullet to fixing inequality, but the closest thing we have is girls' education. And so that was really huge for us. And so we wanted to do that. And now with the Dissent cuff, we really need to continue to work for equality, for women's rights, and for bodily autonomy. We just have to. And I think it might mean small conversations in people's homes, like literally over a coffee, just saying, let's just talk. Let's talk about your concerns, and let's talk through. And that's what I had done on the level of talking to doctors and talking to nurses and people in healthcare, saying, when you force a pregnant person to do what you want them to do, I want you to see how this happens and what it rolls out to. And I show them a video of a woman who this happened to and how she describes what's happening to her. So half of the profits from the Dissent cuff are going to go right back into fellowships to support people who have a project that they want to do. And I've been talking to other groups like National Advocates for Pregnant Women about sponsoring a law student or an artist or an architect, or, it doesn't have to be just, oh, it's all for law students. It's not, or a doctor. It's not. It's for anybody who has an interest in bringing opportunity and moving equality forward, but especially on the right to control your body, and especially for women, because there is, the patriarchy exists, whether it's like air, whether you see it or not, I'm telling you, it's there. And so to be able to address that, we wanted to put money, a lot of money, half back into supporting exactly that. We're supporting what we're dissenting from, which is this idea that you don't have the right to liberty. And so we want to have people who have a vision, a creative vision. And we also wanted to do it on an individual level, as opposed to look, I love supporting major established organizations, but we wanted to really give a creative person or people an opportunity to do a project, as opposed to have funding go in to pay, something that might not go to direct service. So we wanted to really focus on a direct link. And for me personally, there were some things along the way, like I won some essay contests, I would win a certain award. There was the Elie Wiesel Prize in Ethics that I won the honorable mention. Actually, speaking of Rachel Maddow, we shared the honorable mention that year, which was just kind of funny. But those things had a major impact on me. It felt like the world saw you and the world said, your ideas have value. And there are some people who don't need external validation, and I think those people are amazing. And there are some people who, it's nice to have it sometimes, So for me, it was really meaningful. And I thought if we could establish something that had a fellowship aspect to it, it had some kind of, kind of a pastiche to it. It had a little bit of a shine, as opposed to we've donated. And look, donating is necessary and amazing and important, but I wanted to focus on individual people and possibly inspire somebody to take a path where they would be able to do that work and do more of it. I know that this week or recently, President Biden talked about student loan forgiveness, and for $10,000 is being forgiven for people who are making a certain amount of money. There's a threshold. And it's almost along those lines, like people who have a really great idea and a project and need funding for it. That's the vision for what the Dissent Cup is going to stand for. And I actually only have a couple of dozen here, because Italy is, like I'm telling you, these things they're not made fast. They're made by hand. There are several factories involved. There are, Italian artisans who have hands on them. They're hand painted, the whole thing. And we don't have very many, and this is a capped edition. It's a limited edition. And then we'll kind of see where this idea takes us. But right now I'm really focused on the idea of dissent being exactly what you said, Kaliko, which is Ruth Bader Ginsburg's. There were two lectures that I looked to where she said this, and she was quoting from a 1936 lecture from Chief Justice Hughes of the Supreme Court, where it is about dissent, and dissent truly is speaking to the intelligence of a future day. It is an appeal to the intelligence of a future day. And it is not just the idea of we're mad. We are gathering ideas and putting them forward in the world so that a future society can look back and say, there's an anchor. And that's the idea. It's not necessarily like I'm wearing this because it's some kind of negativity. No, it is not. It is positive. It is channeling that energy of we are appealing to the intelligence of a future day. And whether that future day is as soon as this next election cycle, or the future day is 50 or 100 years from now, we are standing up on the right side of history. And that's what Harlen is about. And that's what the Dissent Cup is about.
What are you looking forward to this year?
Oh, in terms of just generally, or in terms of Harlen? I mean, I can speak, I'm looking forward to so much. I'm looking forward to having a kind of a new normal. I'm not quite sure where we are. We're sort of in pandemic, but we're not I'm a little bit not sure where we are. So I'm looking forward to having some clarity on that, but I'm just looking forward to, in terms of Harlen, to bring that new collection forward. to bringing these smaller items to the community where people can, I'm trying to think of like, it's not, again, look the part, but it's express who they are through the medium of beautiful made in Italy accessories. And that's what it is. It's being able to channel who you are and your energy and whatever your descent may be, or whatever work bag you need to reflect the work of art that you do for the art of work. That's what I look forward to doing. I look forward to creating that and to being part of the community, and also to working through the law to make change. And the cases that I work on are very much civil rights cases. And they have so many nuances and challenges, but I'm looking forward to bringing more information to people and making change through the tools that we have, and tools that are sort of unique, like, accessories and descent cuffs. And also just that they're cool. It's really important that they're just cool.
They're stunning.
If you're not into it. Like my sister sent me a picture of Elvis with a cuff. She's like, "This is like your cuff." And I'm like, "Well, I didn't even know that, but look at Elvis. I mean, amazing. He's in the club, So, and I, frankly, I don't know that. I just know the film. And I thought it was just funny that she made that connection and sent me the picture. So.
I also love your other tagline that you have on Harlen: "Together, we shorten the arc, hasten the bend, and move women's rights forward." So purposeful, so passionate.
It's obviously a hat tip to Martin Luther King Jr. And he borrowed from some liturgy from another pastor, I believe, a reverend. And it is speaking about the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. And there, over the last, I would say 5 years, there were a lot of moments where that didn't seem like it was correct. And it was disheartening, because I just think that equality raises all ships, that it's not pie. You don't have to sort of have this idea of scarcity. And Kalika, that's one thing that is so inspiring about you and the multifaceted work that you do, is that you always see, and I think entrepreneurs, you see opportunity as opposed to how can I take from a limited pool. Rather, entrepreneurs as a mindset, I really think, see spaces that are unfilled, as opposed to, oh, I'm going to go get some of their, I'm going to take what's theirs. But they create, and they open the space, and they create jobs, and they create products, and they create services. And that's what's so inspiring about entrepreneurs as a group. And what I love about your group and the EO mantra, and making things happen and creating things that weren't there before, as opposed to like, well, that's ours, we're taking what's ours. And so to me, that hastening the bend and moving opportunity forward for women, there's so much talent that is left on the sidelines of, these people who are not allowed to participate, whether it is implicit or it's just kind of, or it's explicit rather, I should say, or it's more of an implicit, like, kind of what Ruth Bader Ginsburg would say, channeling Sarah Grimke's quote about, we're not trying to take away anybody else's rights. We just want you to get your feet off our neck. We just want to be who we are, like, and not have you kind of stifling us. And it's so interesting to me that I was looking at chairs of surgical departments recently, because I was interested in how many women were chairs of surgery departments. And it struck me that, not universally, and I have to run the numbers, but it did strike me that there were a number of like first chairs of the department, first female chair of the department, who had an ally in the department, a brother, a husband, a father. And it is absolutely not to say that they got, it was nepotism or a special deal. Absolutely not. So don't get me wrong here. But it is to say that I wonder if there was somebody who kind of ran block for them, who was like, you can't pick on her. You're not going to be able to throw her under the bus like you throw other women under the bus. You're not going to be able to like bro culture her out. And look at how these women and other people succeed when you just let them be and let them shine and let them excel. And so that's more of the issue, is that we really want to hasten the bend and get there faster. Because I saw I think it was from like the World Economic Society. It's on the Harlen website, but they were saying at the pace that we're going, like women's equality and equal pay will get there in 257 years. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? What? That's, and I think back to my grandfather. He saw that a girls' sports league was needed and he just did it. And so I think, thinking back to what CEOs and entrepreneurs can do is you have such an opportunity for leadership. You have such an opportunity to create. You're so creative as it is. You see things that other people don't see. Like you have these lenses through which you see the world in a positive way, in a generous way, in an everybody can succeed way, as opposed to, like I was saying before, I'm putting up a fence, this is mine, get out, and you're taking from me, like a scarcity kind of mindset. And so thinking about that generosity and doing that in everything you do, it's going to radiate from your company. It's going to radiate from your brand. People are going to want to work with you. They're going to want to purchase from you because they feel good when they do it. They feel seen. And I think for people who align with those values, that's fine. And look, I remember when Nike, it was within the last couple of years, came out with support for kneeling. And there were people who were on social media, like burning their Nike socks or cutting up their shoes. And there are going to be people like that. But again, as entrepreneurs, when you're creating a community, when you're creating a brand, it is about differentiation and to take, no stand at all. If you stand for nothing, like I guess I'm quoting Hamilton, like if you stand for nothing, Burr, what do you fall for kind of thing. Like you have to stand for something. And I think entrepreneurs have that opportunity. And I hope they use it for good.
You are just such an inspiration. Do you remember when we met a decade ago at Smarty People?
I
remember that?
Remember, and I actually remember we went and we got salads together. We were like on a break because we were both. I think we both have a value of continuing education.
Thirst for learning.
Yeah, we're always learning. I mean, one of the things I love about you, Kalika, is you're always sharing the latest book or how mindfulness can improve your life or your happiness. Or I just saw your newsletter that came out today that I would encourage everybody and their friends to immediately get on because it is just so inspiring. There's always a quote that speaks to something that's going on that helps me. And I love those reminders. I love how you live your values and I love how you share them with the world.
Likewise, you are just such an inspiration to me. And thank you so much for being such a champion for women, for women's equality, for young women, to get them on the right path with education. Everything about you is just the detail. And I mean, right, they say God is in the details, but truly your creativity just infuses, and everyone just needs to go to harlencollection.com and just experience Dr. Julie Cantor's brand. It is phenomenal. Purchase some of those Art of Descent cuffs too.
Thanks so much, Kalika. I was going to say they're a limited edition, and we have people right now. They're purchasing multiples because they want to give them to their friends, and we think that that's amazing. We know that there are people out there, like my son is a shoe aficionado, and he's like, they only let you buy one per person. I'm like, you know what? Right now, we just want to have people share. And we're at least for this edition, we're absolutely welcoming people to purchase. And we're so excited about that. And one thing about the details of the Descent cuff, we explain this on the website, but the word Descent is written in the official font of the Supreme Court. It's blind embossed onto this finest Italian leather. It's a brass interior that's bendable, so it fits, anything. I've seen people wear them on their ankles. I've seen people wear them on their upper arms, or, it's really cool what people are doing with them, or they stack them with other bracelets, which is really cool. And then, like I said, on the inside, they're hand numbered. So they're limited edition of 500. They have the Harlen logo and made in Italy. And then they do have the official citation to Roe versus Wade in memoriam. So you remember when you had the right to control your body, and you look forward and you appeal to the intelligence of a future day when liberty means liberty for all.
Always. Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank
Cantor.
you for having me, Kalika. This
You're
is
just
such
the best.
No, oh my gosh. I love everything you do, Kalika. I'm such a fan. I really am.
I'm so glad that we stayed together, right? I mean, like from the time that we met, right? We were so young back then.
I know. Oh,
I think you didn't even have a child. Like
no, and I had no logo. I had nothing. I didn't have nothing. I mean, I was working as an attorney, and in my like free time, I guess, if there was any, there wasn't really, but I guess when I wasn't falling asleep in the office or something, I just had this, I just knew I wanted to do something like this. And I was inspired truly by people like you, Kalika, who are like, oh no, you don't have to just have one business. You could have two. And I'm like, well, what does X have to do with what? Like, how does waxing go with website creation?
It doesn't.
Right. And that was amazing. That was like mind blowing to me, because I'd always thought, how do I fit in the box? And it was frustrating because I couldn't find the right like box to fit in. It just didn't work. And there was this one book that I remember reading that we've talked about before called The Renaissance Soul. And it was so uplifting and almost freeing, because the author said, there are some people who are just this way. And the sooner that you accept yourself and say, okay, here's how I'm going to structure this. And I remember there's like a pie chart in the book of like, one of the pies is family, and one of the pies is like, for you, it would be the, like Citrus Studios. The other pie would be, the EO and the podcast. Like, so it was about creating this life, even if you weren't like, I'm a pediatrician, or I'm a, whatever the like fill in the blank that our culture kind of imposes on us in this moment. That it's okay to have sort of a Leonardo kind of a spirit where you're, doing anatomy and building planes and like, it's
a bicycle.
Okay. Right. So, and painting the Mona Lisa. So that was inspiring to me. That book was really helpful, The Renaissance Soul. But everything that you do is in that spirit. And I thank you for having me on the program. It's been a pleasure. I always love speaking to you, and I love working with you. You're just amazing. And if anybody has the opportunity to do anything with you, whether it's to have you as a speaker or to work with you, or they should jump at it, because you're amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're just so kind. Thank you. Well,
no, it's true. 100%.
All right. You're the best. Take care.
Thanks so much. Be well.